All right. Happy Wednesday.
Happy
I'm
Wednesday.
so I'm so happy to see you. It's been, like you said, it's been a minute. It's been probably in person. We probably haven't seen each other in, I don't even want to count,
I know.
several
Long
years.
before the pandemic. Yes.
Exactly. So, okay, Sin, I don't even know how to introduce you. And I already feel, I have to admit, like my heart feels so fluttery.
Mm.
And I think I know why. And I was
Oh,
like, oh, I don't want to get emotional. It's just pounding. It's pounding in my chest because you are one of these people who have such authenticity and it just shines out of you. And I know for me, like if I'm in a place where it's almost like you're like the tuning rod, right? If I'm in your presence, it's like I know there's not going to be any hiding anything. My heart's going to just be wide open. It's like you've got that ability to see into people's souls and so it's like I didn't even realize the things I was feeling today. But I'll tell you what, when I went to your website this morning,
mhm.
I'm going to see if I can switch over to it. I have to read this, and this will be the introduction for who you are. So,
Okay.
Sin Salach is a poet. She is the founder of this wonderful site and service called Poemgrown, where she creates what's called occasional, is that's correct, occasional poetry commissioned for special events in people's lives. And this includes, births and deaths and any kind of milestone. You will get together with your clients and you'll write a personal poem for them and for the occasion, which is just amazing. It's amazing. So this is what really got me today. I read this. Let me just see here on your site. Okay, you say grief and get gratitude. So here's a quote on your site: grief and gratitude are kindred souls, each pointing to the beauty of what is transient and given to us by grace. So, um, and then this is your introduction. To my great fortune, these are Sin's words. To my great fortune, as a very young child, I discovered that poetry lives in the space between grief and gratitude, reminding us that love is at the heart of them both. As humans, we navigate these spaces every moment of every day, sometimes soaring between them, often stumbling. But I had a childhood secret. I knew poems could help my heart fly at the times when it most wanted to crawl. I knew poems could say out loud what often felt impossible to find words for. I knew poetry could heal and love could win. What what a purpose. What a mission statement. So, for me, that just like I said, just like kind of blew my heart open because I didn't do a story time with writers last week because I was attending my mom's memorial service. My mom passed away in January. So this is, very raw. And I read that. I thought, oh my gosh, that speaks to me on so many levels because that whole idea of space between grief and gratitude, right? That that's amazing. And then you say also in your about page that you had always wanted to be a poet, right? From a young age. I used to write poetry, very smarmy, kind of, teenage 12-year-old, very rhymey. And it wasn't great. But my mom loved it. My mom loved it. And it's
Mm.
funny because when I finally started to write fiction, I always wanted to be a novelist. My mom was always like, but what about those poems you wrote when you were 12
Mm.
years old?
Oh,
That would kind of be your response. You'd say, you write about such sad things, or why does everything have to be sad and stuff? And I don't know why the poetry wasn't, unless it was just kind of on an immature level. But so that spoke to me when you wrote that, you have that written on your about page. And the other thing that I resonated with was you said you had gone to U of I to get a degree in advertising because who knew you could study poetry? And I was the same way. I also I wanted to be a novelist, but I had no idea that that was something that anybody could do. So yeah, so with that as sort of a intro, tell me just kind of, I don't know, anything you want to share about, what's your story? What's your story in general? What's your story this week in particular? And what do you, as a writer, as a poet, someone who deals with strong emotions, not only your own, but others, how do you navigate that? That's just a small little question.
That's a great question. That is the question, right? Because if we remember the how we navigate this, then we're good. But that is so much easier said than done because it's like I forget every night when I fall asleep and I wake up and it's like, wait, what am I here to do again? And then I go through, the meditation, the process, the reminders of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, followed by permission to let myself do that. This is a new awareness of, when we're little, when I was little, 8 years old in my bedroom, writing those poems, nobody was telling me to write poems and no one was asking me to write poems and no one was certainly wanting to read them. I would sit my friends down and read them, but I just did it. I just did it. It was my heart talking. It was how I made sense of the world. And but then we grow up and we go to school and we have all these other layers of things. And Madeline L'Engle, the young adult author, talks very much about how creativity is just sort of beaten out of us as we grow up.
Yeah.
And so we fight. We need to fight. Fight's not the right word. We need to constantly be invited back into our creativity. We need to be given opportunities and reminders and support and encouragement that it's really a normal part of the human experience. And actually, the more creative we live, the more creativity we allow, the more aligned and connected and rich any experience is going to be, from drinking our morning cup of coffee to falling in love with a soulmate.
Hmm.
So I just did this beautiful symposium on it's creative aging and and little moments of creativity during the day. And it was so much about just tiny habits. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, mostly I was told that I couldn't do what I was doing. Like even I
Yes.
did take some poetry classes in college, and I actually had a poetry teacher who questioned my poem, the poem I wrote. Like, you do know this is poetry, don't you? I'll never forget that. Like, what does that mean?
Wow.
And so it was this constant, I swear the universe was like, nope, this is your path. Nope, this is your path. You are a poet. And so my whole life has been finding out what that means. And it means something different every day. Last
And
week,
how did you go from being a poet, writing your own poetry, to then creating poems for others? That to me is a huge leap. It's enough to feel inspired and creative on your own and to have your own sort of muse or something you want to express, but then to do that for others, it has to be a really unique gift.
it was not such a big leap for me. The big leap was in claiming it as my life's work, like saying out loud, yes, this is my business. I am a poet, putting it on my taxes. This is, how I make my living. That was a leap.
What a contradiction, or what oxymoron, or poet and then putting it on your taxes. It's just like, I know.
I always wonder what they think when they look at my taxes. But occasional poetry is actually the oldest form of formal poetry. So
Mm.
way back in the day, before there were Hallmark cards, before there were, flower delivery services, if you had something, a life event, which could be a birth or a passing or a marriage or anything, you would hire a poet to mark the occasion.
Wow.
It's just what happened. And so really my business is not new. It's very, very old.
I love that.
Um,
Who knew, right? I would not
and
not have known
yes,
that.
and most of the poems that I've always written have been for people or about people, or it's just does seem to be relationship. I love to write relationship. And so
Mm.
that is, I got asked formally, it became a business when I got asked to donate something to a school auction. And I donated a poem. I said I would write a poem for someone. And I wrote a poem for this woman, her daughter's 7th birthday. And I sat down and I interviewed her and she gave me pictures and I wrote her poem. And she sent me an email back that said, best gift ever in capital
Oh,
letters. I'm crying
wow.
already and I'm only on the third line. And it was like light bulb, like,
Wow.
oh, well, yeah. So I formalized it. I woke up the next morning with Poemgrown in my mind, and
Um,
which is not something that usually happens to me. Usually I wake up like, okay, what are we doing? um, so to wake up with that clarity was really lovely. And yeah,
you're almost
so
like a midwife or like a doula for others, and
yes.
do you, you know, I guess there's a couple things that I think about as, you know, writing fiction and even write as a memoir, having written a memoir. And I think for any writer who's wanting to write something true emotion, we all kind of come up against grief, which is, I'm sure, a big part of what you do.
Mm.
And I'm just thinking, what is it about grief that makes us want to express through, use the written word to express in our stories or in our true life stories, in poetry, when it is so incredibly hard to pin down and it's so many attempts have been made and we know we can never really touch with words what we feel, and yet we have this desire and so much of what we write to
Mhm.
somehow shine more of a light on that. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, how do you approach that with not just grief, but other? I mean,
Mm.
joy is difficult too, right? It's this sort of these ineffable like qualities. Like how do you pin down these emotional moments, which of course you need to, right? That's what it's all about.
Yes. I think grief, um, I am someone who's I'm a good crier, I guess you could say. It's something that I've always been able to um, feel the sadness and express it. But grief is another level. And I think what grief does that no other emotion does is it just cracks us open. It cracks our heart open. We're so outside of ourselves. We're so broken that we can't hold it back together. Normally, we can kind of like maybe we think we can control our emotions, right? Or manipulate them, or maybe we're feeling a little sad, but really we're not. We can kind of, but
Yeah.
grief, all bets are off. Heart is cracked open. And so that is the time that we can actually hear our purest love
Mm,
for what we're grieving for ourselves, for the relationship, or yes, for the relationship, because there's always a relationship, whether it's with a person or whether it's with ourselves or whether it's with a memory or an experience or a time of your life. That is relationship. We have relationships with our lives, and grief just breaks that open. So as a poet, to stand with someone in that grief, I can just ask questions and they can just answer, and I'm translating that story into their
right.
poem. So it's a very different experience than writing my own poems, writing a poem for myself. When I
Right.
write a poem for someone else, it really is listening to their story and then translating it into poetry. And it's
Mm.
much a part, they're very much a part of the process. And there's a,
Yeah.
yeah, so
I like how you say, those moments, the relational aspect of it, because as you're talking, I'm remembering being in the Chicago Writers Loft I went to for many, many years. I remember one particular time where we talked about grief and how do you write grief. And Jerry Cleaver, who was the founder and leader of the Writers Loft, said, when you write about grief, it's those little microscopic daily life moments. And I'm sure you know this well, finding out how did that person fit into your life? What's going to be gone now? And the example he gave was not so much, trying to capture a feeling, but it's the thinking ahead of the moments that you thought that person would be beside you.
yeah.
And at that time, I remember we had lost a friend at kind of a young age, and at his funeral, his best friend stood up and said, and this is the part that just, of course, rocked the room. You know, Terry will not be my best man at my wedding when I get married someday. And that, if so it's those moments that you realize you're going to be alone in those moments, those milestones that are coming, which is interesting because I think just my first thought or understanding would be, well, you look back,
Yeah.
you're grieving what was lost, you're grieving the past. But so often I think it's grieving the future. It's grieving this, the road ahead seems
Oh,
like, oh,
absolutely.
this person won't be there. So I thought that was a really helpful tip, just a writing tip, that you don't have to try to kind of boil the ocean with explaining these
Yeah.
emotions, like you said, that are so big.
Yeah.
You just really zero in on these relational, or these the sort of the aspects of the relationship that were special
Yeah.
to the people. So, you know,
In the feeling of it, in the writing of it, what rises is the love that is still
mhm,
there. Love doesn't go away when you're grieving, but it does get kind of, it's not the primary thing you feel. You just feel
yeah,
some pain. But when you start writing it or speaking it, then the love starts rising up. And then there's a fuller experience of the grief that then welcomes gratitude. That's where grief and gratitude, hold that space together. And
right.
and that is a healing space. That is a sacred space. That is an honoring space for each other.
I love that. That's great. Well, so what are you most excited about at the moment? Do you have anything new in the works, or are you
I
um
do.
what
I
do you
always,
want people to know about? What's a good story here coming from your end of the
let's see.
world?
Well, I have two, if that's okay. One is one
Yeah,
that
yeah.
just happened, and one is one that's going to happen. So the one that just happened was I got invited to Home in Your Pocket Day at Olive Mary Stitt Grammar School.
Oh,
And
cute.
this amazing teacher, Nancy Brown, created this 10 years ago. And once a year, they have Poem in Your Pocket Day, and the students make themselves pockets and they wear them around the neck. And the teachers type up poems for them, or they write their own poems and put them in their pocket. And every few hours, the school stops and they pull out their poems and they read them to each other, or they
Oh,
share, or they trade them. It's
I
incredible.
love that. Oh my
I was
gosh.
there just to help them celebrate
Adorable.
poetry, write some poetry. So I was with over 650 kids throughout the day. And kids, they just, the joy of poetry, the silliness of poetry, the truth of poetry, they're just there for it. They're just ready for it. And
Yeah.
a couple times we did a lot of call and response, and a couple times I got to say, there is no wrong way to write a poem. And they all screamed back at me, there's no wrong way to write a poem. There's no wrong way to read a poem. There's
I
no
love it.
wrong way to read a poem. And that healed me, right? It healed all of those
Yeah.
teachers, all those moments where I felt shame because I didn't understand a poem, or I didn't understand the poem I wrote, or, oh my gosh, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not deep enough,
Yeah.
or all these messages that keep people from really eating poetry, just filling themselves up and letting it heal and delight and just, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful.
It was wonderful. I want to do that more.
Yeah.
Um, and then I am getting ready to host my first retreat with a healer, Emily Blank,
Okay.
and it is called The Yes of You. And it kind of came forward quickly. And like a big yes often does, caught us off guard, but we are in the process. We're about to launch the registration, and it will be
Oh,
in
wow.
end of October in North Carolina, Hot Springs, North Carolina. It was
Okay.
very important for me to do it before the retreat, before the election. Um, I working with in circles of women is something that has become very profound in my life, and
Yeah.
spaces that I want to hold and spaces that I want to be held in. And so will definitely be a circle of women.
Oh, wonderful. Well, you'll have to definitely give me the link so I can put it underneath the post
Thank
and people
you.
can
I
check it
will.
out.
Thank
That'd
you.
be great. Thank you so much, Sin. This has
Um,
been really wonderful just to see your face again, kind
yes.
of in person, not quite. We'll have to move into the in person soon
Yes.
enough, but
Please.
still, it's
Please.
nice to chat. And really, thank you for being my guest. And
Thank you
love
for
what you're doing. I love that poetry is, it's you're taking it out into the world, making it a business. I mean, why not? This is wonderful. Like, I just love it. It does give everyone permission to sort of see things differently. Any type of writing we want to do, do it. You
Mhm.
never know where it will lead. So,
It's true. William Carlos Williams says, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, but men die every day for lack of what is found there."
ah, lovely.
And so,
Wonderful.
yeah, poems can.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again and enjoy your day. And we'll post all these links so people can check you out.
Thank you.
And yeah,
Thanks for what
well,
you're doing, amazing writer. I
thank
can't
you.
wait to hear your next novel.
Thank you. Trying to work on a bit of I'm stuck a bit right now, but you know how that is. Just bit by
Yes.
bit, just
Yeah.
sentence by sentence. So getting there. But this is always fun. This is just a fun,
Yes.
little diversion
Thank
for me to
you.
go sit and talk about writing. And then I feel more inspired. So sounds good.
All right, let's
All
both.
right. Well, thank you so much.
All right,
We'll
thanks,
talk
Tammy.
again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.